Crystal Castles was released in the arcade by Atari in 1983 and ported to several consoles, including the version I'll be talking about here, the Atari 2600, which came out a year after the initial arcade version. You play as Bentley the Bear, who, according to the story, wakes up after a nap trapped in a witch's castle and has to collect all the gems within the castle to break the spell and escape. So yeah, the plot is about as forced as anything you could imagine to conjure up an excuse for a maze game, but nobody gave a shit about that in 1984. The only thing that matters is the game any good? And yeah, there were a ton of copycat maze games in the early 80s looking to capitalize on the success of Pac-Man, and this was no exception. I mean, you run around a maze collecting items with the goal of clearing the screen while avoiding enemies and picking up invincibility power-ups. So how is this not like Pac-Man? Well, for one thing, I'd use the term maze rather loosely. There are tight corridors, but the maps are more rigidly constructed rather than a crazy abstract maze. Also, you can jump, so you're not restricted to just running away to evade hazards. You can run straight toward them, as long as you can leap over and outrun them. And more importantly, you're not totally confined to a grid. It's an isometric view, and you can move sideways, creating a pseudo 3D viewpoint. For the 2600, it's executed fairly well, although it does take some getting used to as far as perspective goes. It's a little tricky lining yourself up, but it's definitely satisfying to be able to evade enemies by going around them or shifting off to the side. Aside from the gems, there are also honeypots that award you with extra points, and 20,000 points awards you with an extra life. So you'll want to grab these when you can, not only for the points, but also because a swarm of bees will appear from time to time when the honey is on screen. The other item is the magic hat, which gives you the temporary invincibility I mentioned earlier. Some of the enemies also eat the gems, which is a blessing and a curse, because they can actually help you finish the stage technically, but they do rob you of points that you could accumulate for extra lives, so this is really a fielder's choice. Like I said, the screens aren't really mazes, but the rooms are well designed, they're not too boxy, and there is a good amount of variety between them, and a decent amount of levels to boot. There are also elevators to add into the mix, but they all alternate which one is moving, so you gotta wait around for your turn. Or you've gotta project when your target is about to come up in the rotation as you run around the area or whatever, and then head toward the elevator as it arrives. Plus you have to hold down on the joystick for a bit to get on. It's not as simple as navigating yourself there. And that's the other thing. While the controls are indeed responsive, they're a little bit stiff, which is part of the learning curve with maneuvering around in this layout. The original arcade game used a trackball to control Bentley, and while the joystick isn't nearly as precise, I do gotta say that despite its flaws, Atari did a fine job in translating it to the joystick. And the same can be said for the game itself. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a worthy translation to the 2600.
Ain't it